Welcome to this process video for my Inktober 2019 experience. This is going to be a compilation of the Procreate replay videos. Procreate is the app on the iPad that I use to illustrate all of these for Inktober this year. This is the first year where I've actually completed an Inktober. It's been really fun. It feels like a nice accomplishment here at the end of the year. We've got somewhere around 31 pictures here that I've drawn, and that represents something on the order of about 30 hours for me. These drawings took anywhere from, I think there's an outlier somewhere around 20 minutes. There's an outlier a little higher around an hour 45, and then most are somewhere between about 50 and 90 minutes. So this first one, this prompt for Inktober was ring. This is a butler. You ring for your butler. This is really a great start for me because this is what I doodle, is just weird characters. So thought of a couple different weird ones. Finally ended up on this shape, that hair. You saw me try a few different things. After that first one had taken a while, this is my outlier on the quick side. I like just abstract lines that kind of give an idea of things, and this is kind of my thinking man take. The prompt was mindless. This one right here, I thought initially of that Jaws theme, and you can kind of see me trying a few different things as far as bait goes, but then I ended up on this image of a bear trap, and for me, I thought, well, where do I see a bear trap? And eventually that led me to putting it in a kind of Looney Tunes, Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote kind of environment. And in this case, the bait that's in the trap is one that you and I fall for all too often, and that is easy credit. The funny thing that I thought about these sequences on Looney Tunes was this addition of a label where kind of the coyote would be running and then still frame with a label and some really made-up Latin scientific label. So I had fun making up that one too. For this next prompt, which was freeze, who better to act as a character reference for this than Frozone himself from Disney's Incredibles, I guess Disney Pixar. I had some ambition to do some sort of action pose with him, but then I thought, well, I'll just start with the head, and that took me long enough. My sons asked me several times which was the hardest of these drawings that I did, and I keep coming back to this one. I think it was hard because, first of all, I was trying to make it look like something that was very familiar to people. A lot of these drawings are totally original, and nobody knows if they're quote correct or not. But in this case, I'm using this reference, and people can tell if it looks like Frozone or not. So that's one aspect. The other was I had watched some YouTube painters. It was like Ross Draws or Eric Anthony. I'm not sure that's his name. And I really liked how they just took this painting aspect in their art to the next level. And I haven't practiced that. I'm not good at it. It's not even really what Inktober's about, but I spent a fair amount of time on this. You can see me really on that face, especially that nose, man. That nose turned out great. I love those cool color shadows kind of glowing on that left side of the face. I think it turned out pretty well. The rest of this is me just kind of dialing it in and saying, well, I took so much time on the face, I got to make the shape of that helmet actually look like a non-scribble. That one was really fun. On this one, I started out, I have a previous illustration of a box on a conveyor belt that I thought of maybe reviving that idea, but then I thought, well, what are some of the big things that have been built, and build was the prompt in this drawing, and well, the pyramids, one of the wonders of the world, right? But what better than the pyramids than pyramids left by aliens, something like from Stargate, that kind of thing. Here you can see me in the bricklaying phase. This was tons of busy work, but I was sitting on the couch, really listening to General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and this was on a Saturday afternoon, and I had 2 hours, so I had lots of time to just kind of doodle and draw bricks. So this was a good time to kind of just let my hand go while I was thinking about other things. Those little bricks on that little pyramid, they're so small you can barely even see them. I think even when I was drawing them, and these canvases are 4,000 by 4,000 pixels inside of Procreate. Even those bricks down zoomed in, they were aliasing across the pixels. They weren't very pretty even zoomed in. This is me trying to find some sort of brush that gives me a little bit of a sand and some texture effect. I think right there you saw in the shadow I used the Gaussian blur for the first time inside of Procreate. That was fun. I got some satellite imagery of the Nile River, which I don't even know if it's close to the pyramids or not, but I just composed the two together and seems to work all right. And the final touch, some sort of high-tech thruster here that's taking the top of the pyramid back to space. For this piece, which was a husky, my son has been talking about how much he loves huskies, so my thought went kind of directly to maybe the traditional or obvious choice here, which was just make a husky dog. So in this one, I really like drawing hair. It like this fur, short fur, kind of feels like drawing grass to me, and so the idea of drawing this was fun. I thought, hey, it might be fun to do something with like no lines. I didn't want to outline anything. I just wanted it to be essentially, fur, where, you can see multiple fur lines or whatever that kind of create a contour, but then there's no kind of outlining in the, more traditional sense. In that respect, and my wife thought of this when she saw it, she said, hey, it kind of looks like one of those scratch boards where you have the paper with the ink on it, and then as you scratch the ink away with your kind of chisel pen or whatever that's called, you can see the chalk or the other color that's below the ink. And I remember doing those in, middle school art class, and that was a really good time. I loved that. So that was a good memory for me. It turns out, digital ink for this is cooler because, we could change the color. So, the different color of hair here was just kind of really fun to work with. I like how the piece turned out. Now it's just figuring out where to stop. I think this one's one of my favorites. The prompt is enchanted. I think the first thing I thought of was the Disney movie Enchanted, but not wanting to draw a princess or whatever, I thought another moment longer, and kind of my mind went to Sword in the Stone or the Once and Future King and Excalibur in the stone. I kind of had this vision of a moss-covered sword, but I think eventually I just went for the moss-covered rock and then a glint in this sword. This ray of heavenly light or whatever that kind of promotes this idea of enchantment, I think, was one of the most fun parts. I really like how those kind of solid, brighter streams worked inside that more blurred light. Here, getting that texture on that moss was really fun. I like how that turned out. It was pretty believable. And then I just cloned that and recolored it a bit for the bottom. And then the grass, the highlights on those grass. I don't get to do highlights like that very often, but I always think in other people's art it looks great. And then look at that A, it's just right in the light. Perfect. For this one, this is fragile. I was going to make some grandma or something at one point. But Thought of something a little bit more epic, and that is this man kind of standing against the wave, this giant wave. And I thought of something fragile, kind of like me or you and I, where kind of the forces of the world or the things that work against us. The world's kind of a dangerous or sometimes, not super friendly place. It can feel like a lot of things you're kind of going against the grain if you stand for anything. So this fellow who's standing out on this thrust of rock, you know, it's kind of against this dark sea and this monstrous wave, like bigger than life, is out there coming for him. And kind of I think the wave, the color of the sea, that kind of thing brought me to the idea of Scandinavia. And so hence the Norwegian word here for frail or fragile. Frail was the prompt. Swing here. This is a dual inspiration of really comes from my son first, but then thinking of the cartoon inspiration is from Calvin and Hobbes, and in fact, that swing right there is directly out of a panel of Calvin and Hobbes. I looked at one of Calvin swinging, and that's what that's from. But the composition here of the boy, man, my kid, he loves to bike. All summer he's wearing his bicycle helmet, whether he's biking or not. So this is him kind of going crazy through the air. Next, the prompt is pattern. I just thought of one of these weird sweaters that are just kind of nerdy, and then thankfully, the person that came to mind as the nerd to wear it was Steve Urkel. I think that show was the Family Matters. I don't remember what it was. It was just we never really watched it unless we saw Urkel on it. That was those those are the times I remember caring and watching and thinking it was funny. This is me erasing the glasses after I realized I had kind of like bent them over the nose. I wasn't sure how I came to that, but it's always hard to erase something that otherwise you think you drew okay, and take a chance the next time. This is me trying to figure out how to draw a hand and an arm. I think it worked out okay. Here, since the focus was pattern, I just tried to keep everything else somewhat subdued, but the pattern, I guess, also turned out kind of subdued. So I'm not sure it's really a fantastic piece to represent the prompt, but I do think it's super fun. Love Steve Urkel. On that first pass, you can see me using marker, but marker is kind of odd in Procreate. The next prompt is snow. I was kind of in a hurry today, and it turned out good because, snow is white and you don't have to color much. This is the dog Snowy from the comic Tintin, which is awesome. Although in the French version, I don't think it's snowy at all. All right, for dragon, I thought, well, I could draw a dragon. Not very good at it, but my boys would have sure liked it. But I thought of dragon what? Dragon fruits. And so here's a dragon fruit. I had actually never seen one. I had heard of it, so I had to image search it and figure out what a dragon fruit looked like. Turns out they look super awesome. So, you would have assumed that, I suppose, if you thought, hey, someone thought of calling this a dragon fruit. This kind of next phase in this drawing with the white overlay, kind of the geometric lines, and that's really kind of the imaginary layer of the dragon and kind of this more fantastic style. This is from somebody I saw on Pinterest had that style of kind of cool geometric shapes on top. I just thought it was great. For this one, ash. I can't remember if I searched for ash or volcano. I thought of volcano instantly. Just did a Google search, and turns out there had been a volcano in the news that had gone off recently. There was a little thumbnail, so this is me kind of looking at that little thumbnail and putting it into the painting. This one really was more of a painting. The interesting part is just the color as the sun hits this ash. Oh, it's super fun. I really love the richness of these colors. And then this style of kind of the overlay. This is my, inking part. This prompt was overgrown, and man, I have no idea. I had some weird inspiration today. I don't know what it was. I don't know really how I came to a camel, but I just envisioned. Well, I think first I was going to do another one of my son pictures, which you can tell I'm inspired by my son, but thought I'd do an animal instead. Animal outgrowing his clothes if an animal had clothes, and camel seemed to be like something that would bust out at every seam. So here's a camel kind of coming out his neck. His pants that were supposed to be pants are now shorts. And just looked at a couple photos of camels with some really cool decorations on them. And so got to play with that. That was a fun part of making this seem more interesting. Okay, for this, the prompt was legend. And hopefully, this scene brings to mind something that looks familiar to some of you. This is the beginning sequence in the Monkey Island game, number 2, LeChuck's Revenge. Monkey Island was a PC adventure game from LucasArts back in the day. I think it was probably like around 1990, something like that, maybe a little later. Anyway, I can't remember if this main character, Guybrush Threepwood, I can't remember if this is the treasure of Big Whoop or if he almost got the treasure, whatever it is. Later in the scene, Elaine Marley, the love interest, also rappels down and starts talking with him and essentially rescuing him. Um, but man, Monkey Island was always a super fun game. I played number 2 the least, but this is one of the most iconic scenes, I think. So, Legends got me thinking about Big Whoop. If I can draw a bit of fan art, I think this was. Is this my first piece of fan art here? I guess, no, I did Frozone earlier for Freeze, but this was fun. This last stage, getting the shadow kind of in the ray of light under Guybrush. I thought that was a fun little touch. All right, I've got another inspired by my son character here. This is what it feels like in my house full of wild people sometimes. That the game is how loud can I be? It doesn't even matter what the noises I'm making. It's the decibel level. That's the contest. So they don't usually have cymbals, though we have. It could be a cymbal, a triangle, a flute that someone's blowing through as loud as they can. But we kind of walk through the house just going crazy a lot of the time, just unbridled energy. So it is wild, but it's a party. Hence, the confetti. The kids are great. They're overwhelmingly great sometimes. All right, this was a piece that I thought I'd have a little bit more time on, but we were packing that morning to go on a camping trip, and I was just kind of hurrying through this. I heard ornaments, and that could have been Christmas ornament really easily, but I just tried to think of something a little less traditional and unexpected, and came to the idea of a hood ornament. And I think the Jaguar hood ornament is about the coolest one you can see. I don't even know if they put this kind of ornament on new Jaguars, but I used to know a fellow in my neighborhood growing up who had Jaguars. They were old and had this style. This flat paint, I really like how it turned out. It was mostly because I ran out of time to shade, but I left it, and I really like how it looks. Here's another one. This character is probably is also in The Incredibles inspired here with the haircut. I can't remember. Oh, the Jack Jack was the name of the baby. He had kind of that single piece of hair look on the top. Misfit is the prompt here, and it's just the baby that we all feel like we are sometimes, trying to fit into our grown-up responsibilities, I think. So I'm channeling myself a little bit into this. looking at the full frame, you can kind of see that I was zoomed in too far and didn't finish painting the top. I'll have to come back and finish that. For slaying, I thought immediately of David and Goliath, and I thought here for this next piece, what could I do that's a little bit less traditional than just, David seeing Goliath? And what if Goliath, kind of like that wave piece that I did earlier for the fragile prompt, was just kind of like imaginary and super big, kind of like way bigger than he could have been. So here in this cloud of dust, kind of sand cloud, I think was a cool way to kind of see what that could have seemed like in the imagination of David and the other onlookers there. For this next, I thought initially of the snake. No, don't tread on me. The prompt is tread, but then I went to this kind of tire tread, looked at a few. Tire tread's actually a pretty cool pattern and extremely difficult to make, I think, even just as a repeating pattern, but here it's kind of in this perspective. So it kind of got pretty cartoony and and not super accurate, I guess, pretty quickly. And that's okay. That's kind of my style anyway. I'm not patient enough to make it super accurate. So this tire tread looked pretty aggressive, had these fun shapes. That's mostly why I chose it. I think the fun thing here was just kind of the extra thick black lines here they're all pretty messy. And it's nice too because, even the painting was meant to look messy. It's a tire. It's not supposed to look pristine. And who could be observing this, or why are we looking under the tire? I guess there's this ant. The ant I was trying to do in some different outline colors that weren't black, but that was difficult. It's amazing that white on there was really helpful in getting that to pop. For this next piece, the prompt was treasure, and that was, I think, the first and only that I used a photograph in a part as a part of the final artwork. I was going to draw some coins, but it turns out, that pile of coins was really hard to make look believable, so I kind of blurred that into the background. I don't know if immediately I was going to do a moth as a part of this, but the reason for the moth in relation to treasure, I quickly came to this mental connection of the scripture where it talks about treasure in heaven versus treasure on earth, and that the treasure on earth is what moth and rust doth eventually corrupt. Essentially, it's limited in its time and scope. So found a good reference of a moth. This moth was beautiful. It had great colors. I really didn't do it justice. I was doing more of a kind of a pencil, or I can't remember the brush here, but kind of that more textury kind of drawing or painting there. This next one was quite quick. When thinking of ghosts, it's Halloween time. It's Inktober. I could have done a Halloween ghost, but instead thought of maybe related to my spiritual theme of the last composition, the Holy Ghost, the Spirit of the Lord that can touch us and guide us. For Ancient, I was going to initially draw a velociraptor, and you can kind of see that here. I think I had seen some artwork about on a raptor that was pretty cool looking the day before or something. But then I thought, hey, this looks like that lizard or iguana or whatever thing that's off of Rescuers Down Under. Her name was Joanna, and she was a pretty funny character. But lizards are ancient, one of the oldest kind of animals that we have, right? So I thought it was a good thing. She's kind of in this faint spotlight in the shadow. I was going to do more kind of rocks around the edges, but I was in a hurry. Cool texture there at the end too, I think. This is Dizzy, and by now we're on day 24 of Inktober, so by now I'm looking for kind of new things to try. So I'm trying all sorts of things in this as far as Procreate's ability. I've used a perspective grid here with drawing assist, and then here at the end I kind of go crazy with liquefy. I'm twisting and distorting the kind of look into the cityscape, that feeling of dizzy and things aren't quite right. And then also the text label gets that treatment as well. For tasty, which is the prompt here, man, if I could think about, which of these prompts are about things that bring me joy, just the idea of a nice cold drink on a tropical beach. I've never quite been to a tropical beach, so I'm not sure it's really for me, but in my mind, man, this is one of the best things I can imagine. Nice warm sand and some amazing clear aqua blue water. Oh, so cool. Just thinking about it. I mean, maybe the water, the ocean you could swim in is even more tasty than the drink. I had a green straw initially, but then, you know, red. Red straw is just very typical, I guess. This is me trying to find that delicious ocean water color, but I can't quite find it. For the prompt dark, I immediately wanted some sort of space scene, star gazing kind of scene. And when I started just looking for some inspirational images, saw this one of the curvature of the Earth with the aurora borealis coming through as well. I think this was shot from the International Space Station. That was awesome. Also, just seeing lights on Earth from space, man-made city lights is super cool looking. I did not do it justice. I spent more time on the space colors and that. For coat here, I wanted to go back to just a character study here where coat was kind of unexpected. I thought of maybe doing like an Eskimo coat. Those are cool. I could do some more fur, around the head covering. But I thought of red coat here, which is another recognizable thing. And just tried to make this a little bit more cartoony. I did have a reference that I was kind of looking at the coat for. Made this guy way more of a character and then added the coattails there. Those aren't in the reference. I also tried the marker brush again here, and I was going for something in this case that wasn't super digital. It was convincing it could have been done in physical medium. And I think marker does that well. For ride, I started with a map texture that I bought at a design cut sale and layered my limited artwork on top of that. It's a simple idea, but I love the look of maps. This reminds me of that Simple Metro game, and I thought the text added was pretty funny. The funny theme really continued with the pirate, which is probably the most comical, I think, of the entries. As I was thinking of injured, who better to be injured than a pirate? Pirates are really this walking dictionary or I don't know, an index of many different kinds of injuries that you could have. And as I thought of the first quick, easy ones, the eye patch, the hook, the peg leg, those came pretty easily. But then I thought, it'd be funny to also add this self-inflicted wound of the ear piercing as well. And then just some sort of story behind each of those. Pirates are good subjects for a story. They're swashbuckling. They do a lot of interesting things. So there's kind of some funny little mini backstories that I came up with for each of those. Here in this hatching, I thought this was fun to try a different style. You can see me kind of redo some of the coat there. And that was a cool thing across Inktober was I felt like I got to try a lot of different styles. I didn't stick to any one. That would be a different kind of challenge, I think, to carry one style across all of the different pieces. But here, I think the cool thing is I got to try and and showcase a lot of different ones. For catch, I initially thought of a baseball catcher who I think looks pretty cool in a catcher's uniform. That could have been fun to draw, but then I thought, oh, this is kind of funny and very relevant, having spent a lot of September succumb to some winter seasonal change illness. I thought, oh, catch. We could catch something that's a sickness. And then this became like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, kind of like I can see some microscopic world interacting with this larger world. And the idea of these swirls, kind of, there's a pathway into your nose, you're sucking things in. This is probably what I think of every time I tell my kids to cover their mouth when they're coughing and sneezing. And then finally, we have number 31 here. The prompt is ripe, and the time was ripe for me to finally do a October or Halloween kind of themed drawing here. So this is a pumpkin that's well past its prime. The coolest thing about this pumpkin, I think, are all these old pumpkin kind of bumps. I don't know if that's really old pumpkin. It's probably more of a variety thing, but the bumps definitely give it a lot of character, I think. And then just the sagging shape, I think, is also pretty fun. Since I've gotten into digital art too, and I think this pumpkin's a good example of that, just this work in color has come a lot easier to me. I've always been one that's afraid of like the cost and mess, I guess, of real paints. Having the digital paints has been a lot of fun. So here's a ripe old pumpkin to round it out. Inktober was awesome. This is my first time all the way through. I think I would do it again. I'm going to keep drawing till the end of the year. Some different things, but hope you've enjoyed all these. Thanks.